It's a Minefield is an audio exploration produced by us, people who ride the waves of mental and emotional distress.
Our expertise comes from our lived experience, and these are the stories you'll hear, along with those who are on the journey with us.
The roller coaster of mental health can be lonely and overwhelming, but we're all in this together and would love for you to join us.
Hey, Hannah.
Hi.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, I just had a really good chat with someone.
Who was that?
It was a neighbour of mine, of all people. And the reason I wanted to record this chat was, as you know, I've been through some pretty bad stuff this year and come out of hospital a couple of times. And this neighbour of mine, Greg, I know that he's been through some very dark places in his life. Now, we often have these kind of chats when passing in the hallway, and this one time I said to him, "Are you happy that you didn't die?" And he said something along the lines of, "Fucking oath." So I thought, oh geez, I want to learn more about that. You know, there's some wisdom in elders that I think sometimes we miss out on, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, sometimes by society, people who are older are kind of pushed to the side and not heard, or, their opinions mightn't be considered.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that we ignore elder people's opinions because we think they're doddery. And they're like, what would they know? They're old and grey and wrinkly and slow. They must, their brain's got to be slow too. But the reality is they've lived a full life. They've gone through the whole gamut of experiences, and they've actually got some pearls of wisdom to share with us that could actually be beneficial for our own lives.
Totally. Well, I look forward to you hearing this interview. Greg didn't have pearls of wisdom, he had an ocean. And I got to tell you, this conversation did change my life. A few months back, you will recall that in passing in the hallway, we often have these little vignettes. And one of the little vignettes I came back to is when I asked you, after I'd come out of hospital after, having a suicide attempt, you had disclosed that you had had some darkness in your past. And I asked you a question that I often ask people who've had darkness, which is, are you happy that you didn't die? And your response was somewhere along the lines of, my words, fucking oath. Can you talk about that?
Oh, yes. There is a joy for me to living as I've learned so much about myself through life, and I've come to accept the good with the bad. And look, my life is such that, it was all over the place when I was younger. I got married at 20. That relationship lasted about 3 years, maybe 4 years. It was only a marriage that we were both kids when we got married. We were both very immature. I was running from a part of myself, a shadowy part of myself that I couldn't accept. I had trouble accepting it. I was brought up, and that was the gay part of myself. I was brought up in an era when it was just not part of the social mores, and the laws were right against it, and there was still a 1950s attitude to homosexuality in that day and age, and so many of us, there were no role models. As you grew up as a kid, there were no role models that you could see who were openly gay, and not like it is today. It was all so concealed and hidden. If there had been role models, one could have identified as a young person rather than feeling like a freak. And, when you're younger, you don't want to feel like a freak. So basically that darkness always remained with me till I eventually started to become more true and open and honest with myself, and realised, realised that I've got to start having a life which is more authentic and true. And that took some time. It was a process. It was like an evolution of thought and personality growing into my skin and accepting myself for who I was. It took some time.
What influenced that time? So when you talk about the darkness, I'm assuming you're talking about the darkness of being closeted, being gay and that sort of thing. What influenced you coming to terms with yourself and that sort of thing?
It's a long story. What it was, it would not go away. I separated from my wife, which was really not a wife marriage thing. It was not really a marriage. It was just, in a way, it was a marriage of convenience to hide that part of myself. And later on, I had another relationship with another woman. I had relationships and intimate moments with men as well, and through this process as well. And I also had another relationship with a woman that lasted about 10 years, and that's who my youngest daughter came from. And she knew about this other side of me. She accepted that. I was open with her about that. But eventually, there came a time where we decided it was better to separate. And I was doing a lot of things like I was smoking pot excessively at that stage to try and push down and run from this other reality. And I don't know if I'll put this in, but what happened, I ended up in the McKinnon unit at Rozelle, and I did a 3-month stay at Rozelle where no drugs, and I could just sort myself out and straighten my act out and start to grow into myself.
Was this 70s or 80s? I'm intrigued to know what a psych ward was like and what precipitated you going there.
It was early 91, early.
Yep.
Yes.
And what was it like?
It was good. It was a safe haven. It was a sanctuary in the harbour. Well, with a storm raging, it was a sanctuary where I could sit with my feelings and discuss it with counsellors in the Rozelle, who were very good and very compassionate people, and I owned myself for who I was, and I was keen on recovery. I needed that badly. I didn't want to use drugs, pot anymore. I didn't want to smoke. I didn't want to smoke pot or drink alcohol anymore. I wanted to live with a crystal clear mind and a consciousness that was clear and embraced me for who I was. But prior to me getting into that place, I went through a pretty dark period where I came very close to killing myself again. And it was just fortunate that it didn't happen. I won't go into the circumstances, but it was very, very fortunate. And why I wanted to kill myself was the denial and repression of the homosexuality. I was having trouble dealing with it, even though it was it was 1991, I still felt it was that residual from what I'd grown up in, the 1950s. The 1950s where, I grew up in the 1960s and the 70s. I was born in 1954. But that 1950s was present through that thinking about gayness and homosexuality. It was never discussed except in really horrible terms.
I came out in 95 in a suicide note. So yes, it coming out, I mean, I never want to say coming out gets easier. My assumption is that it is easier now than it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. But yeah, I'm very familiar with the difficulties and the darkness involved in hiding a significant part of yourself from others.
And the self-hatred that goes with it.
Yeah, and a little self-hatred, the close companion of shame.
The close companion, the shame is always present. And it's not what I would call a companion, it's more like a demon.
I often describe suicide or shame as companions. We're both gay men, and do you notice, as you were born in 1954, so you're 70 this year? 70 this year. In 2 months?
No, in a few months.
Oh, in a few months. As you got older, and I want to talk about your partner soon, as you got older, did you notice any different challenges, or what were the differences in being a gay man in the 90s a gay man in your 40s, 50s to being a gay man now? Are there any notable differences?
Oh, yes, it's much more accepting now. There are more, there were the 78ers and the movements that happened, including the gay games when they started in 1982. And Australia sent a contingent over there. They were all big movements for social justice and change. And a lot of those people lost their positions where they worked. They couldn't, once they came out and stood up against the oppression, they paid a dear price, both with careers and money.
Let's fast forward to 2020. Now, in 2020, you gave me a call in 2020 and you asked me if it was okay if you could practice reading your partner's eulogy to me. Something I found a great honour. Thank you. It sounds cheap to say it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure and an honour. Now, can you tell me about that?
Yes. Would you like me to read a little bit?
I'd love that.
On Saturday, December the 5th, 2020, after my partner had been in hospital for a few weeks, through hushed breath, he held the back of my arm as I drew closer to him. Talking was very difficult, and he could only be heard through hushed tones at this stage of his illness. He then said to me, I have been having visitations from deceased persons that I once knew. I asked, when asleep or awake? He replied, both. Do you remember what has been written about that? I said, Peter Fenwick has written and talked about that. That's right, he replied. Who are the visitations from? I asked. He replied, my mother and father and a Catholic brother who was a teacher from Aquinas College. His name was inaudible. I couldn't hear his name, but I knew it was the teacher from Aquinas College because he had spoken about him before. And he went on and he said, he saw my abilities in athletics and protected me and brought out the best in me, winning the GPS Smile. That's what I knew of the brother. I added that bit, but that's what he knew. He mentioned other friends as well. Then he said, I think my time here may be coming to an end. I love you so much that words can't describe. You have been such a loving, loyal and committed partner and companion of the soul. You have a good mind and an ability to learn. You have been very important in my life, and I am so fortunate to have you. You have helped me immensely to fulfil what was revealed to me in my MDE. I won't put the year in. Without your loyalty and steadfast patience, I would not have been able to have completed this work. The moment he grabbed hold of me and I drew in close to hear his beautiful words, there was a complete serenity about him and within him. He had accepted his fate and was at peace. There was absolute peace and calm emanating from him. I detected a radiance in his smile and a sharpness in his eyes that were piercing as well as serene. He had a smile on his face that seemed to glow with a peaceful acceptance and complete ease of approaching death. And not lost in that was the love that he had for me. Tears streamed down my face. My heart expanded as if I had swallowed the sun. Realising how much in love I was with this man. I was and had always been and always will have that love for him. I believe love at this level is eternal. I experience this moment as a divine gift. Feeling the contradiction of extreme emotional pain and extreme love together, all bound up in that one moment that seemed to last an eternity, it is something that will remain with me forever. My partner said to me, with his beautiful smile and piercing blue eyes that emanated a brilliant warmth, "I will be here for you when it is your turn." "18 days later, upon approaching his death, within the last hour of his life, and aware that he had lost his voice completely by this time, at this point I will read a note that a friend and relative of his who was there with me at this time, this is what she said. She was my encourager who witnessed it and says he would have wanted this to be made known to his friends. He had progressively lost his voice over 5 weeks. He could weakly nod or move his eyebrows to signal, but he could not utter a single word. Near the end, I leaned forward and whispered to him, "I love you greatly." He took in a deep gasp of air. Our eyes and hearts met, and he voiced, "I love you, Greg." In return, clear as a bell, these were his last words. Yet another gift to me.
How do you feel reading that out now?
I feel a bit emotional, but I feel connected when I talk about it. Emotions are good. They connect you to reality instead of being disconnected. They connect you to something that's ultimate and beyond yourself, if you can acknowledge emotions. Many of us in our culture, particularly males, are told not to feel, not to have emotions, not to emote. And we see the end result of that with a lot of psychological illness and stress in society, even on political level, mass levels.
Tell me in simple terms, what does your life look like now? What's a day-to-day life look like now?
Day-to-day life looks, for me, it's evolving and it's changing. I got back into music after my partner passed away. I got back into music, and I found the joy of being able to express myself through music.
When thinking about talking to you, I was having one of my many existential moments of, is it worth being alive or not? Am I glad I'm not dead or not? One could assume that you could be in a place of darkness now, with living alone, partner dying, things like that. But you're not.
Actually, I'm still connected to my partner, I'm still connected. In what ways does that happen? I feel absolute. Sometimes I can be feeling sad. I acknowledge that. I'm human. But there are other times where I can just be sad or lonely. But loneliness doesn't last with me forever. It's only a fleeting thing. I enjoy my aloneness. I live alone, but I'm not lonely. And there are times where I can be at home and I don't feel alone. I don't watch much TV until in the evening. And if something comes on that my partner and I were shared together, or if I put a movie on that my partner and I shared together, and there is a sad moment in it, I can find myself having tears rolling down my eyes because they are the moments we shared together. And I turn around and I talk to him as if he's there still, And they're beautiful connecting moments, those memories. And I was standing in my kitchen yesterday, cooking lunch, and all of a sudden I felt this unbelievable amount of love. And I felt these arms go round from behind me, and I was being hugged from behind, and it was Peter. I'm not saying he was there. I'm probably projecting my stuff. I realise that. But just that feeling of his love and his presence was so sustaining. We had a deep love.
Because sadness over someone that you've missed, someone who's passed, really the magnitude of sadness almost represents the magnitude of love. So they're just so closely intertwined.
Yes. There's an inverse relationship that's going on. Those moments really do sustain me, and I have a few of them. And I also have the other too. I can realise this can happen too, an inverse. I find myself getting cranky. And I think, and then I start realising I'm cranky at him. He's not here. He's fucked off. He's not here. And then I realise, these are the emotions that are behind what I'm feeling. And then I rationalise and go, this is stupid. He can't help it. He's not here. He can't help it. Yeah. But I'm explaining that because emotions act outside of the temporal framework. They don't exist in time. They're timeless.
What advice would you give the you who tried to kill themselves those years ago? What would you tell them?
I tried when I was about 18 one time, and another time in my 30s. I tried. The first time I tried was over an argument. Well, actually, I was coming out to my mother, and my father overheard the conversation. And he was listening. I didn't think he was. He was in another part of the house, and he flipped out. He flipped out. He'd come out. He wanted to kick me out, and got very aggressive. And the following day, or within the next couple of days, I felt hopeless, ashamed, and all alone. I thought I might as well end it, so I attempted, and I was basically saved by two friends. I would say one has to be true to themselves. One has to own themselves. Greg, it's not going to be easy. You're going to go through many different moments in life. You're going to go down many roads with cul-de-sacs, and you're going to come out of them, or you're going to go into right and left turns, and not all of them are going to be in the right direction. However, it's worth hanging in there because the journey is worth it in the long haul. Being alive is a gift. It is a gift because, for me, I've learnt so much about myself. I've got great kids and great grandkids, and I'm there for them to help them through their struggles in life because I look at them and I see the joy in them. I see so much joy and aliveness. I'm seeing a young me when I watch them, and I'm thinking, I've got to be here to help them and steer them through some of these hardships. I had a dream in 1983 that helped me. There was this large figure of a man standing in front of me with his back to me, dressed in white. He turned around and he faced me and he said, "Greg, my life was not a well-lived life and I know better now." As soon as he said that, I came back into my body instantaneous. It seemed like an eternity to get there. I came back into my body. As soon as he passed that message onto me, I came back into my body, and it felt like I'd been cardioverted on the chest, and I woke up, sat bolt upright, clutching my chest, and that dream remained seared in my mind and my memory forever. And 2 or 3 days later, my then partner got a phone call. We were at home and she picked up the phone, and it was my friend. Somebody informed me my friend was on his way to see me from Sydney. He was in Brisbane and he passed away. And I can't explain that dream and the power and the impact that had on me. But that set off a catalyst within me of change.
How does one make life a well-lived life?
One's got to take painful decisions. One's got to be able to look within themselves. Honestly, it's not a journey that's simple by any means. You're looking at shadowy stuff that gets repressed, and there's also the shadowy stuff that one represses that one doesn't want to allow into consciousness and awareness. Particularly if you're gay, you understand that stuff. And guess what? You bring it out in the light, you shine a light on it, fuck, it's beauty. It's beautiful. You start to love yourself for who you are, not hate yourself. It's, that's the effect it has. It's like shining a light into those dark regions of the psyche to be able to transform and inner yourself and become that lotus that you were meant to be, and start to flower beautifully.
Thanks for tuning in.
It's a Minefield is produced by Chris Jager
Hannah Achilles.
and Leon Fernandes.
Audio by Lockie Hilda.
We're kindly supported by the Mental Health Commission of New South Wales. You can reach out to us at iamf.org.au. And remember, we're all in this together.